This is the Georgia Farm Monitor. Since 1966, your source for state and national agribusiness news and features for farmers and consumers about Georgia's #1 industry, agriculture. The Farm Monitor is produced by the state's largest general farm organization, the Georgia Farm Bureau. Now, here are your hosts, Ray DeLessio and Kenny Burgamy.
Since 1966, eh?
Wow.
Well, that means the Georgia Farm Monitor is now entering its 49th year of existence. So glad you could join us for our first show of 2015. I'm Ray DeLessio.
Yeah, and Happy New Year. I'm Kenny Burgamy. Once again, we have a special show for you. Last week, we brought you the YouTube stories that made the top of the list for 2014. Today, our reporter picks, the stories they enjoyed most during 2014. Coming up, Ray travels to South Georgia and learns all about the famous Fitzgerald chickens and how they became permanent residents of this tiny town. Plus, it's indeed the future of agriculture. Mark Wildman tells us how technology normally used for military purposes is slowly making its way to a farm near you.
And then later, Kenny here goes one-on-one with the reigning Miss Georgia, why life on the farm means more to her than any crown of jewels. All this and more starting right now on the Georgia Farm Monitor.
Mark Wildman is up first today, and rest assured he covered a lot of ground during the last year. But during Sunbelt Expo in October, Mark brought us a story that's in the news almost on a daily basis. UAVs, which is short for Unmanned Aerial Vehicles. Not a week goes by where you don't pick up some type of farm publication and read about them. Love them or hate them, they are the future of agriculture.
As this rotary aircraft takes off, you might easily mistake it for a toy, but it is not. It is one of the latest advancements that might change the way farmers view their crops. Out in the fields, the Georgia Center of Innovation for Aerospace organized an event to highlight these unmanned aerial vehicles. Its director, Steve Justice, works hard to make sure Georgia takes a lead role in developing this new technology.
We've had a 5-year plan working with industry, academia, organizations, the federal government, including the FAA, to prepare the way in Georgia for this new market. We've been working with Middle Georgia State College, many companies, Georgia Tech, and today is a culmination of those efforts where we're having flight demonstrations of unmanned aircraft systems to show farmers how they can use them in agribusiness.
The FAA gave permission for this event to be held. Not only were rotary vehicles launched, but a fixed-wing aircraft as well. And getting FAA approval to do this is a big step for the industry.
And this is the first time we know of that the FAA has allowed these kinds of vehicles to fly in an environment with lots of people, lots of equipment around. So that shows a real vote of confidence for what we're doing in Georgia and our universities.
Chad Dennis with Middle Georgia State College was on hand to help out with the aerial demonstrations. Middle Georgia State College works closely with the program, and as unmanned aerial systems take off, the college wants to keep up with the growing technology.
Currently, we're developing UAS academic programs. We're hoping to start offering them as early as the fall, but this spring we'll be putting together various types of certificate and possibly even degree programs. We as a college are able to better adjust to what the industry's needs are and help the FAA in their effort to determine how to safely integrate these into the national air system.
One of the private companies that is developing these aircraft is Guided Systems Technologies. This Georgia company's founder is Eric Corbin. He was on hand to answer questions from spectators on the future of this industry.
So we produce a whole family of fully automated unmanned helicopter systems, including the aircraft you see here, which has been fitted with a simple ATV spray rig for experimenting with spray applications, particular precision spot spraying of crops.
Those involved with unmanned aerial systems say agriculture and these aircraft are a perfect match.
You already have precision agriculture with tractors that can drive themselves and GPS and all these different sensors that they have on the ground. Now we're going to add them in the air. And the trick is to integrate this, make the eye in the sky part of the overall system that the farmer uses to monitor his crops and to increase his yields.
This technology is still in the very early stages of development, but as farmers and others see the potential for growing Georgia's agribusiness, it is sure to gain in popularity. Reporting from the Darrell Williams Research Farm, I'm Mark Wildman for the Georgia Farm Monitor.
Nice job, Mark. Thank you very much. As one of the top fishing destinations in the state just a few years ago, the Okmulgee Public Fishing Area was forced to close back in 2012 after water levels dropped drastically. However, as Damon Jones reports, the 106-acre lake could be back up and running in a couple of years. That is if it receives the proper government funding.
What was once teeming with crappie, brim, and even largemouth bass has now turned into this. 8 years ago, the Okmulgee Public Fishing Area was opened and quickly became one of the premier fishing destinations in the state. However, it would be short-lived as a huge problem started to arise.
Here at Okmulgee Public Fishing Area, the lake was full until just a couple years ago, and then we noticed that the lake level was falling more than it should. And what was happening is that the water was going down through the floor of the lake and into the aquifer. So we were losing water at a significant rate, and the lake essentially dried up.
Now the only fishable part of this 106-acre lake is this small children's pond used to host events throughout the year, which is not open to the public. It's a far cry from its heyday when reeling in trophy bass was not out of the ordinary.
And it was very disappointing because this used to be a draw for the whole central Georgia and even South Georgia area to go trophy bass fishing. It was a tremendous destination, and at one point 10% of the population in the lake, at the point that it started drying up, 10% of the population of bass was over 10 pounds.
It's that type of attraction the Department of Natural Resources is looking to restore, as it's asked for a $2 million government bond, which will have to be approved by the General Assembly next year. Once the money is there, they are very confident the problem has been pinpointed and can be permanently fixed.
The restoration project here at Okmulgee Public Fishing Area is going to involve removing the dirt that's there, that's compromised, and the trees and so forth, and then laying down a layer that's kind of like silt fence, and then we'd come back with about a 3-foot layer of clay, and that will seal that lower 18 acres, which is where the leaking and the interaction with the aquifer is happening.
Now, Diener does warn this project should take place as soon as possible, because the longer the basin is left to grow, the more difficult and expensive the project would become.
The plan is to get the funds this winter to start repairs next year, and that will be excellent because the trees won't be growing in the basin, so we can go ahead and get to it and get the fish stocked back in so the public can come back in and fish.
While getting this operation back up and running would be beneficial to the environment, it would also provide a boost to the economy, as just 2 years ago, tens of thousands of fishermen all over the South paid this lake a visit.
Our public fishing areas have a big impact to the local economies and to the state as a whole. Each area generates approximately $1 million a year in economic income to the local economy. So by getting this back online, we're generating income for this area and the state.
Reporting from Hawkinsville, I'm Damon Jones for the Georgia Farm Monitor.
Great job, Damon. Now, when we come back, how a simple experiment by a scientist resulted in the town of Fitzgerald, Georgia, being overrun by wild chickens.
Plus, Kenny spends the day with the reigning Miss Georgia. Her thoughts on growing up on the farm and being a role model for the Peach State. That's next when the Georgia Farm Monitor's Reporter Favorites of 2014 continues. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Georgia Farm Monitor and our Reporter Favorites edition for 2014. Back in June, Maggie Bridges, a senior at Georgia Tech and a native of Brinson, Georgia, was crowned the 2014 Miss Georgia. Before heading off to Atlantic City in September to compete against 52 others for the title of Miss America, Maggie and her family took some time out of their busy schedule and shared their story with the Farm Monitor.
Well, the community of Brinson has a population less than 300 people. Anybody nearby knows Maggie Bridges. That's not just because the 21-year-old is serving as the current Miss Georgia, but that's because she's part of the Bridges family, longtime farmers and business owners in Decatur County.
Maggie's a farm girl, raised up here in the big city of Brinson. It was a first. She's the first Miss Georgia from Brinson, Georgia. And we took a lot of pride in that, in that she was raised on a farm and spent her whole childhood on a farm.
Anybody connected to the Georgia Farm Bureau knows John Bridges. He's a member of the Georgia Water Planting Commission and has long been affiliated with GFB. His granddaughter told me before she ever dreamed of being in a beauty pageant, she was helping her grandfather and her father around the farm and at a produce stand.
Well, but my dad actually is someone who's always been able to explain science to me, whether it's explaining how a seed becomes, you know, a fruit, whatever it may be, you know, explaining an irrigation system and electricity and how it gets to an irrigation system. He's always been able to do that. And I think that's something that's really, really neat is he's a farmer and you wouldn't really necessarily expect for him to know all these things, but he's always been able to explain it to me. And my mom's the same way. She's always been able to explain anything about the human body to me. She's a nurse. It's something I've always admired. So between the two of them and growing up on the farm and getting to just seeing things, seeing what fertilizers can do versus what it can't do, seeing, you know, how certain plants grow versus others, learning how to pick vegetables, like learning when they're ripe, learning when they're not, and, you know, why you shouldn't pick them when they're not ripe. You know, just learning little things like that kind of inspired me to follow my dreams as far as going into the science field.
Dad said he's proud of his daughter's accomplishments, both in the pageant world and in her academic endeavors at Georgia Tech.
Well, it's such a long shot, you know, they're a very talented group of girls there, especially when it gets down to the end. All of those girls are very talented, and you just realize that you're very fortunate that she wound up as the last one standing, but really proud of her, really proud of her.
Still trying to figure that one out. You get to spend the day with Miss Georgia, and I'm chasing wild chickens. I'm in Fitzgerald. I don't get that. Well, as the story goes, back in the late 60s, a government biologist by the name of Gardner Bump used a fish hatchery to introduce an exotic species of bird to the local Georgia wildlife. That bird, the Burmese red jungle fowl. Now, although its survival proved disastrous in that particular habitat, many of its offspring found their way to nearby Fitzgerald, Georgia. And so began the 40-year love-hate relationship between the residents of Fitzgerald and their uninvited guests. A quiet, quaint little town, Fitzgerald is nestled away in southern Georgia, just about 90 miles north of the Florida state line. Population around 9,000. Chickens not included.
They don't allow us to count the chickens in the population, but in a comparison test, I'm not sure that they're not gaining on us.
Although no official census has ever been taken, Fitzgerald Mayor Mark Massey estimates that the number of free-roaming chickens is in the neighborhood of between 2,000 and 4,000. And as the mayor of Fitzgerald, it's his job to instill peace and harmony, humans and fowl included. Hence, residents of Fitzgerald must abide by a few simple rules. You're in a car, chickens in a crosswalk. Who has the right of way?
The chickens got the right of way in all circumstances. So just know that you give the chickens as much room as they need. Mm-hmm.
Chickens in your yard, private property, messing with your flowers. Who's got the right of way there?
You can run them out if you think you can do that, but that's as far as you can go.
And let me tell you, these chickens are no dummies. On a hot summer day like this, temperatures in the mid-90s, sweat dripping off you, these little birds are spending most of their time in the shade. So getting these things on camera is nearly impossible. Nevertheless, the hunt was on.
It's hard for these chickens to survive here, but they've done it. And that's mostly why I got involved.
Meet Jan Gelders. Around Fitzgerald, Jan is known as the chicken's caretaker. In fact, if it wasn't for Jan, the Fitzgerald chickens might be nothing more than a distant memory. In 2004, she led the charge in a campaign to avoid having all the chickens removed. Those were tough times. The town was divided.
Back then, we would call it the chicken fight, and it really was. And there were people that hated them and people that liked them. And we had newscasters from all over, and the Associated Press was doing stories that went all over the country about this fight that this little town had between people that hated them and people that loved them. We went to city council with petitions, and the people that loved them won out over the ones that hated them. I think since National Geographic and Southern Living and the Audubon Society has been interested in stories about these chickens, it's protected them and made people aware that even though they may not be the pure red jungle fowl, that they retain some important traits and also bring a lot of people to Fitzgerald.
Jan, however, isn't alone in her never-ending quest to raise awareness for the Fitzgerald chickens. Husband Winfred is pretty passionate about the little critters, too. Just down the driveway from the house Winfred and Jan live in sits the chicken house, a personal creation of Winfred's and his labor of love.
Well, this was an old house. It was one of the first houses built from the settlers that came from Minnesota. Later, when I built my other house, I rented this for a while, and then I decided when I retired I didn't want to rent it anymore. And I was remodeling it, and I said, I think I'm going to call this the chicken house. And I know Jan like that. So I told Jan, I said, well, we're not going to rent it. This is going to be the chicken house. So it went from there.
I've really observed these wild chickens for over 20 years. And quite recently, I've gotten into photographing them myself and documenting what they do during the day, at night. And it's very interesting. They're not like your everyday chicken. And they're very intelligent and they survive.
Ray, you love chasing those chickens, you know it.
I did actually, I can't lie.
Coming up next on the program, a new service to Georgia Farm Bureau members that saves thousands of lives every year. The Monitor spends the day with the Air Evac Life Team. That is next when the show continues.
Okay, so when you add salt to it, it turns it back to a watery substance.
Snow in wintertime is not an uncommon sight in Carroll County, but it is unusual to see it indoors. Welcome to the world of fake snow, or rather snow that's chemically created. These 4-Hers in McKenzie mix the ingredients.
With the sodium polyoctrate powder, we take it and we put water in it and it turns into snow.
Feel the energy, and we're not just talking about the enthusiasm of these kids here. It's part of a 4-H energy education project, and 800 youngsters have gone through this program in Carroll County. Agent Kenny Herndon leads the group as they do a number of experiments, all with an eye on the future.
Getting our 4-Hers thinking about this at a young age will help them to maybe spur some ideas and cause them to go into those energy-related fields and maybe look for the next oil or the next diesel or the next gas or natural gas.
This 4-H program features kits and exercises from NEED, which stands for National Energy Education Development Project. NEED teams with energy companies across Tennessee to bring these programs to our schools. Kids learn how energy can take many forms. There's the energy of motion, and heat and magnetic energy, an example being this plasma globe with the freaky cool lasers zapping all around. It is science with an edge.
We make stuff explode.
Really?
We've done that.
What have you seen explode?
A dollhouse.
Explosions and destroyed dollhouses aside, the bottom line here is to encourage a future generation to find alternative sources of energy and conserve what we have.
We do experiments with solar energy using things like cooking oil, which is from soybeans, which is a renewable energy source.
Because the older we get, we need to learn to conserve it because there's not going to be much of it left.
That's an attitude we should all adopt, no matter how old we are. These kids learn that energy is precious, but it's also fascinating. This is Chuck Denny reporting.
All right, Chuck, thank you very much, sir. Well, in addition to being one of my favorite stories of 2014, one could certainly argue that this next piece might have also been one of the most beneficial stories to you, the viewer.
I really like this one, Ray. With the need for doctors and medical facilities in rural areas at an all-time high, it's safe to say that a service such as Air Evac Life Team is more crucial than ever before. As one of the newest benefits offered to Georgia Farm Bureau members, the monitor was invited to spend the day with members from the Air Evac team in Dublin, Georgia, to get an idea of exactly what Air Evac is all about.
The people that I've encountered, the employees with Air Evac, they genuinely feel like they're answering a calling. I try to treat every one of my patients if it was my family member. So I'm going to do everything for my patient that I would want to do or have done for my mom or my dad or my daughter.
Air Evac started in a rural area. It started out in 1985 in West Plains, Tennessee. And it started out, we don't put a helicopter in the big city and the helicopter have to fly out to you. We put them in rural areas where you're needed. So the time, it saves us time. So we can get the call, get to you within that golden hour, and pick you up and carry you to a level 1 trauma center and get you the help that you need. In rural America, and just looking at the statistics, you're twice as likely to die in rural Georgia or rural America than you are in a large city. Partly being is the time it takes to get you to a level 1 trauma center within that golden hour. That is key. Not only is the time a factor of us getting you to the trauma center or to the right facility within that golden hour, it's the level of care that we're bringing to you with these flight paramedics and flight nurses and the equipment that we have on board.
Right here we have our ventilator in case a patient requires intubation. We have a cardiac monitor with capabilities of doing cardioversion. We also have a full array of medications. It's basically an ICU in the sky. So this is our litter. Our max patient load is 400 pounds. This slides, once the patient's on, we would slide it all the way forward, and we can raise the head as well. But to take it out, we'll slide it back. It unlocks, and then we will take and lift it. We'll slide it out. We'll load the patient on. With our patient secured to the aircraft litter, we'd come in, approach at an angle, feet first, set it down, assist the patient in, slide forward, lock in place, advance all the way forward, retract the handles, and we can raise the head if needed.
I don't know if putting a number on the lives that we've saved. I will say that I know for a fact that we have brought in and made a major impact in rural America. There again, we're bringing a critical care air medical service to you in a timely manner, and we're getting you to a level 1 trauma center or the hospital capable of taking care of your needs as a member. That is one of our safety. It is paramount with us, but also we want to make sure that we get you to the right facility in the right amount of time.
When I do receive information from the receiving facility that the patient that I just dropped off, that I've made a dramatic impact in their life, I feel almost as if God put me right where I needed to be at that point in that person's life to help them through the traumatic situation that they just encountered. And it's a very spiritual, uplifting experience that you have, and I'm glad that I'm able to be in that position. I'm glad that things in my life have led me to where I am today. I love my job, and I love being able to make a difference in someone's life.
All right, that's going to do it for this special edition of the Georgia Farm Monitor. Next week, we're back with all new stories and a new outlook for 2015.
Yeah, for all the latest ag info regarding food, great recipes, and what's happening down on the farm, as always, check out our Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest pages. You'll stay informed and see what's up in the world of farming and the Farm Monitor Show.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week right here on the Georgia Farm Monitor.
Hope you have a great week.